Well, welcome to this special meeting of the Concord Municipal Light Board. Um, Thanks everybody for joining us. This is going to be a very educational experience for us to learn from folks who have pioneered in the world of time of use rates and who have been one of the leading, if not the leading, public progressive utility in the country. So let me turn it over to um, Jason. Are you going to introduce anything or?
Yeah, I mean, I can just thank them as well. Laura had originally corresponded with Alcides, and he has been so helpful with providing information and for their willingness to participate in conversations like this. They really believe in this and have spent a lot of their energy and time to make this happen, and we're very grateful that they're willing to share their experiences with us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alcides and Karen, who are in Sacramento, California.
Well, very nice to be here virtually, and good morning, board members and staff. Laura, Jason, thank you for allowing us to be at this meeting today. I'm gonna share my screen so that way we can go over the presentation. I think I just will go to the share button here, right? Okay. And click here. Apologize that. Let me know you see it on the screen there, and I'm gonna do the full screen just to make sure. We'll keep it that way.
Yep.
It's in there, right? Okay, perfect. Do you see it big enough on your side on your screen?
Yeah, it looks big.
Okay, perfect. So I guess we can keep it that way, and then let me just minimize this part right here. Full screen, I guess. Right. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. All right. Yeah. Thank you once again, Alcides Hernandez, Revenue Strategy Manager here at SMAL. I've been working at SMAL for close to 14 years now. And here with me, Karen, do you want to introduce
I'm
yourself?
Karen McCord. Thank you, Alcides. I'm Karen McCord. I was the marketing lead. I'm still the marketing lead for our time of day efforts. And I have been at SMUD for almost 18 years.
Thank you, Karen. Karen and I had the privilege and opportunity to work on this project from the inception. In fact, I joined SMAD in 2011, and at the time we were going through several radio structures and things like that in preparation for this, and we will walk you through that. So we have several slides, about 28 or so. We will walk you through illustrations of the work that we did, the rate design, the outreach to the customers, the benefits that we have seen, the reduction in load, and some lessons learned that as we embarked and completed this project, something that we found was very valuable, and lessons learned from the process that hopefully can be beneficial to others. We have been giving a similar presentation in the past to SRP, also other utilities from ABPA, and others as they very recently is Seattle City Light. They are also embarking on a similar journey. So very happy to be here, and we'll be happy to address any questions. First, let me start off of who we are. We SMAD, we have the 6th largest community-owned utility in the country. Our power mix is about 78% carbon-free. I was reading that your utility is actually 100% carbon-free. That's very, very exciting to hear that and read it on your website. We have been the utility local here since 1946, so close to 75 years. Our customer base is about 645,000 customers, 2,300 employees. Just like Concord Utility, we have a board member that is elected by the public during general elections. There are 7 board members, and of utilities of our size, as you understand, we are one of the few that has this very aggressive carbon reduction plant that we hope to provide carbon clean power by 2030. And very proud that our efforts are very evident in terms of rates and service that we provide. We are in average 50% lower than the investor-owned utility serving here in our service territory or the nearby service territory. So we have a full website, cleanpowercity.org is a page on our website that has a lot of information about our, we call it clean energy vision. With that introduction, they know that was a lot to cover in a brief slide, but I just wanted to provide that context. In terms of the rates, and I posited that you and the board has some guidelines for staff, for Jason and Laura, when they conduct rate processes and things like that. So our board has these 8 or 9 principles that they are established in our basically public forum, in which we follow those every time when we do a rate process, we do rate structures from reflecting the cost of energy when it's used or exported, because we have a lot of solar generation in our territory, close to about 62,000 customers that have installed solar. And we also keep in mind reduction of energy during peak periods when the electricity is more expensive and we have high demand. Minimize rate changes during rate transition, so that's in terms of bill impacts. Provide flexibility and choices. And as you see toward the bottom of this illustration, we have other objectives, including continue to provide energy efficiency, conservation and carbon reduction, and also encourage distribution energy resources, equitable allocate costs across and within customer classes, rates be simple and easy to understand, and also assist the most vulnerable people, those that cannot afford the bills. So at a high level, every time when we embark on any restructure, the time of day was one of them. We have to look at every single one of these and how the rate is going to help us accomplish that. And it's kind of complicated, to be frank with you, because some of those are in conflict within each other. But we did the best we could in developing that rate. If you want to know more about it, in the presentation, we included the link, which is an actual document where the board adopted those principles. Here were just for illustration. With that in mind, and keeping that framework in mind, I'll tell you that this, for us, it may not take the same time for other utilities because technology has changed. Utilities like us already implemented it, and that may reduce the research and process for others. It took us nearly 10 years to get to the time of day. And in this illustration, everything started when we deployed the advanced metering infrastructure, AMI, and we started that process in 2009 through 2012. And as we went through that, we started restructuring our residential rates. We had at the time tiered rates, those that vary by volume. As I understand, in your territory is from 0 to 700, 700 and another threshold of usage. In our case, it was around that, depending on the utility, those ranges vary. So, and we started that structure in 2011, and also increasing the fixed charge, that in our terminology, we call it System Infrastructure Fixed Charge, SIFC. That's the monthly payment that the customers have to pay to cover the cost of customer care, billing, and a very small fraction of the distribution facilities. It is going to be about $26 effective in 2 days. And at the time, it used to be close to $5. So, and then it went to 7, and the board decided to implement a glide path to increase that from that at the time about $7.50 to close to 10. And after that, we went at 2 years at $2 per year until it reached $20. And we have continued that trend. You can say that, to the point that right now we are at $26.20. And I understood from kind of looking briefly to your website, you are in the range of close, aiming to $30 at some point. So very similar to that strategy that the board has adopted. And in 2012, we began the smart pricing pilot. We partnered with the Department of Energy to conduct a very comprehensive report. It's publicly available. And that was the first test of a time of use rate. At the time, we used to call it smart pricing. We tested the time of use, the different flavors of it, and also something that is more for demand reduction, core critical peak pricing. It was very comprehensive, and the final report was later issued in 2014. Later, I can probably share the links to access that very volume, 2 volumes of that document. 2013, we continued and we decided that we were going to remove the residential tiers, those that the pricing is based on kilowatt hours on thresholds from 0 to 700 and 700 to 1,000 or something like that, and above 1,000. It was around those ranges. So we established a 4-year trajectory to remove those, to eventually remove them in preparation for time of day. In 2016, the board actually, in suggestion from staff, they approved an optional rate, and that rate was tested throughout that year to see how the billing systems and the information will go in getting our experience on an actual rollout of a rate. And the actual rollout, the real one, began in 2018 through 2019. And I will provide more details of that. But this is a high level. That's why it took so long for us to embark and complete that adventure. But I think it turned out really, really well. Some history. At the time, the local newspapers were covering that, news as we were making changes to rates. It's very typical of the local news trying to educate the population and keep them informed. So we addressed many of those and worked very closely with the local media to make sure that the message was the same that we were trying to accomplish. And just for illustration, on the right side, you see that's what we attempted to do. This is just an illustration. We used to have tiers, 700 and less used to cost that, what you see on the screen, and then more than that, the other amounts. And then gradually, we attempted to decline them to eventually end that in 2017, where we had basically a flat price across all usage. And that was like a neutral point where we could move from there to time of day. That was the intent of that kind of transition. It took us several years. And the reason for that is because every customer has different patterns, different usage, and the impacts on each one of them is different. So we were trying to mitigate those. So gradually going, limiting the impacts. I recall we set the threshold of 5%, no more than that. And then that kind of puts a threshold on how much we could do. And then eventually we landed with that flat price in 2017. This slide here, again, a different utility may have a different timeline for this. What I just mentioned is in a way described here, and you see the different years that it took to get us from the deployment of the AMI meters or the smart meters all the way through the right side when we actually roll out the rate. You can see the different phases that we have. On the top side of this illustration, it shows the customer-facing changes that we made from, now that we had data available, how we're going to make the data available to the customers, the testing of the pilot that I mentioned, the restructures. We call our online tool My Energy tool, and we created a framework so that customers can actually access that information through the website. Then we did a number of transitions, digital bill changes, and things of that nature that ended lastly with the implementation of the rate, where we redesigned the paper bill version that we have, and also we created a number of tools that the customers use during that transition. And Karen actually is going to walk us through that later in the presentation. Towards the bottom of this illustration, you see the back office work that was needed to implement the rate. So you see some nomenclatures in there, but the meter management system needed to be updated and implemented. Illustrations on the management on the interval data. Now we need to pull data from the meters every hour in the case for residential and 15 minutes for commercial. We needed some upgrades to that system that happened in 2015, along with other integration. And I'm not an expert in IT side, but it's a data communication in between different systems so they can talk. Eventually needed the development in a bill scenario so the customers can actually get reports on how much the rate was going to impact them, and ultimately developing rate automation reports and letters that were sent to customers. So that's the intent of this slide, trying to show you the different phases, the different activities that we did, and that ended up on the right side with rolling the rate to customers toward the end of 2018 and the first half of 2019. These were illustrations, and thanks, Karen, for the elaboration on that. We have numerous iterations, I tell you, in terms of how to present this to the customers. We have club versions, we have tables, we have different ones. So our marketing team was very engaged with us in having conversations with the customers. These were the ones that I understood were the ones that the customer feel more identified, they were easy to explain. So it was a time of day rate that we call it the name change. We used to call it time of use, which is actually what is normally used in the industry, TOU. But the name, it went through a research work and ended up with the time of day, or TOD, how we call it. 508 is the peak period, and it was a lot of work to put in just to come up with that name, to be frank with you. The rate is very simple. That's something that we found from our focus groups. We conducted a numerous focus groups to trying to design the rate, and our customers through our feedback and also from the pilot rate that we have, it was very clear that they wanted a rate with a very short peak period, a 3 hours window. That's why we made emphasis on 5 to 8 in the summer only. And at the same time, at this time, the electric vehicle, it had become the nascent technology, and we decided to incorporate that in the rate by providing an incentive with a low reduction on the rate between price reduction between midnight and 6 a.m. That feature is still valid today. So you see on the graphs on the left side, we have the non-summer months. We used to call winter, but we call it now non-summer. And you see the prices, they vary. And these are actually the current prices, not the ones that were adopted back in 2017. You see the distance in price between the 5 and 8 and the rest of the hours in the non-summer months. Very simple, not a very complicated rate. In the summer side, on the right side, from June through September, which we are about to begin again after May, the price goes up a little bit more. So it reaches, in this case, now more currently 20 cents, and it reaches close to 37 cents in the 5 to 8 window, which is when we encourage customers to conserve. And it goes down to about 15 cents from midnight to noon. So that's our structure and the rate discount between midnight and 6 a.m. That's an illustration of the rate. Again, a lot of feedback came from focus groups and the smart pricing pilot. If you want to know more specific, and again, in the presentation, we included the link to see what we have currently on smart.org. We have versions of that in several languages, and I know that link particularly guided to the version in English and Spanish, right, Karen?
Yes, yes.
Which is something else that eventually Karen is going to talk about in terms of marketing material that was used in the multiple language. In alignment with our board strategic directives that we needed to offer options, we had to come up with an alternate rate that is not time-based. So we came up with this very simple rate that is flat most of the year, with higher price during the summer month, lower during the non-summer month. You slightly see in this particular graph that there is a slightly increase in May. It just happened that we're going to have a rate increase happen effective in 2 days from now. So that's the increase that you see from 12.95 to 13.31. Otherwise, it would have been the same number. But then after that, we have the summer month. It goes up, but it's very simple. It's not time of day. Prices basically summer and non-summer. This one did include a 4% premium, and that is because it was intended for customers who did not benefit from time of day, but normally they are very picky. You can call it that way, pickier customers. They have a very high peak, and then so the time of day will have been very difficult for them to manage with a higher bills. So this one, in a way, it values that, but at the same time recognizes that those customers cost more to the utility because of that particular load shape of them. In terms of results, we've been very excited to report this to the board year over year, that, and this table illustrates that information. On the left side are the benefits that we initially estimated with the assumptions based on the pilot in terms of carbon reduction, demand reduction, the benefits in terms of finance and adoption. You see toward the middle and the right side, we have evaluated several years, and we continue to do so. And what is the actual performance of the rate? In terms of carbon reduction, has been very, very good. Close to 13 metric tons of carbon, the conversion of the peak demand converted to carbon reduction. The peak load has reduced in average about 8%, close to 130 megawatts of a peak, and has varied depending on the weather and the year, as you see on the screen. Financially, has been super beneficial, initially from $5 million in savings in, we call it commodity cost or purchase power, through say 6 to 8 in the second year, and he's been close to 15 million actually in recent years, with a higher cost of power and resource adequacy being very expensive in recent years here in Sacramento and in California in general. In terms of adoption, we thought that 4% of customers will opt for the non-time of day rate. As you see here, we have been very consistent with the 97, 98%. So we have a very, very high adoption rate. As far as we know, we are the only utility that has this very high adoption rate on a time of day rate. So we're very happy with this performance. In terms of, and as I was looking for all data, I will be frank with you, this particular graph, it brings memories, because as we were transitioning customers, and Karen is going to walk us through that phase, we were tracking progress. And I remember seeing that same illustration with 10%, 15%, 20%, right? As we were making progress. So when we reached this 100% metric, it was a milestone. It was like a moment in time that it was huge. And so we transitioned the 541,000 customers at that time to time of day. Mission accomplished. All of them were up and running. No major concerns, no major hiccups. And overall, the population at the time, it was, as we did, 99%, and then currently at 97%. The schedule actually was ahead based on what we planned, and very satisfied with that accomplishment. In terms of awareness, we did a lot of marketing. And then when we did that evaluation, as you see on this graph, it grew from about 60% in the initial awareness from customers on the new rate to up to 90%. This is the highest awareness level that we have on any SMART program across the board, and very successful. And that's probably the reason why the load reduction was above the estimations that we had. Now, this is the graph that I love every year. So I work also, the team that I manage looks at the load forecasting data, the load data. So I will walk you briefly through this graph. Every year we go and look at what happened the past summer and report back to the board in comparison to what we had before we adopted time of day. So the brown line that you see in this graph, it represents the shape of the 2017 before we adopted time of day. This line right here you see that in the 5 to 8 peak window, we used to have that usage and peak extending almost in the middle between 6 and 7. So later, as we implement the time of day and the green line represents 2022, you see that our customers actually are reducing in that window. And the hump of that graph is actually before that and then declines moving forward, right, in this part of the graph. And the year 2023 was even more than we saw before, but you get the illustration that every time now the 5 to 8 window is a very, very important period in our billing and also the way our customers behave. There's very evident that the response has been significant from what we originally had a load shape without it. And at the same time, you see here that the usage during the non-peak period has increased, which is what we intended, right? Here in California, we have a lot of generation from solar during this window and renewables. We want customers to use that power when it's actually affordable and clean. And lastly, this is the slide before I turn over the presentation to Karen. In 22, we have a record-breaking heat event, probably one of the hottest events we had in Sacramento, 10 straight days, heat storm. Temperature here in Sacramento reached close to 116 degrees, a record for that particular month and that week. We almost broke the record of the prior system peak of 3,299. We got very close, just by 8 megawatts. But time of day and a lot of demand response programs help us to reach that milestone. You see here the trend of that particular day. The load around 3 p.m. was reaching this level, so close to 3,200, and then demand response kick in. We have a lot of demand response programs, and that help us to reduce load during that window. And eventually, when we reach the 5 p.m. window, you know, our customers, because of the already well message to reduce during peak, you see the decline in load at that point, eventually reaching about 5:45 p.m. or 5:50, when actually the states sent a text across the entire residents in California to reduce consumption. And that text actually lowered the demand even more, as illustrated in this graph. So it's a very historical moment, and for us working in the industry, we observed what happened during that time. With that, I think I'm going to turn, unless you have any questions. I know how, Jason, how you like to handle this. Do you want us to continue and or stop here and continue with the marketing part later?
I'll let Warren make that call.
Yeah, let's stop here and take a couple of questions, but only a couple. Brian, you had one.
Yeah, this is amazing. This is all the stuff I've been envisioning since 2012. This is great. So you showed in those last two slides the load change that came along with awareness and pricing. On the annual sales volume front, did you see load growth or decline based on this pricing scheme?
You know, in California, we have a very strong energy efficiency programs and a lot of adoption of renewables, a lot of them coming from solar. What we have seen is new development, the usage in those units is significantly lower than I would call legacy homes. So in that context, our load has been remained flat over the past 10, 15 years. So the last 5, including with the time of day, have not been the exception in terms of volume. And actually, as we were presenting here, Melissa Kwan, the pricing supervisor, just joined us. She's in charge of developing the sales forecast and revenue forecast. It's been very flat, right, the past few years. Time of day hasn't been probably the driver of those sales remain flat. As we dig in, has been more in the context of the energy efficiency and the reduction due to renewables behind the meter technology. And in fact, that new Title 24 is the construction standards here in California are more and more efficient, or more, what is the right word? They emphasize more to be more efficient year over year every time when those are revised. So in terms of load, basically it has remained flat. What we did though is shift the peak from what it used to be to now where it's a little bit less expensive than it used to be between 5 and 8.
Great.
I don't know.
I want to ask another question before Warren moves us on. The net metering or any bidirectional power, what is your tariff structure?
Very good question, Director Brian. What we have is two versions of two iterations of that. In California, we were required utilities to comply with the called net energy metering 1.0 until utility reaches a 5% of the system peak equivalent from adoption of that technology. We reached that in 2017. And then, so we follow a pulley process down the road, and it was in 2021, right? 2021, that we adopted we call it successor rate, and that is different than that. So for that reason, we have two. The first one is the full net energy metering rate or mechanisms that we know very well that exist in California and other places in the country. The one that compensates customers full retail for all the energy that is produced. And the second one that we implemented in 22 is called, we call it solar and storage. That one is different for energy that is exported to the grid in intervals of hours and days. That is valued at a price of 7.4 cents per kilowatt hour. And so we have those two.
I'm sorry, that's a flat rate, that's 7.4 cents?
That is correct.
So they're both flat rate structures.
That is correct. That is a flat rate.
One being retail.
Brian, if we could move on from that for the moment, because I'd like to stay with the time of day rate discussion and get back to the rest of the presentation. But Jason had a question, then I have a question.
I just had a very brief one, Alcides. You are going between summer months and non-summer months, and I suspect that you have billing groups. So in other words, you bill some portion of your customers, every week or every number of days. Did you have a lot of complexity when dealing with those cutoffs when rates change, either from a technology perspective on the back end or from a customer's perspective, like looking at their bill, knowing that some of their bill might have been kind of in the summer months and some of it might have been on the non-summer months, because the split's never going to be perfect. So I'm just curious if you had any issues with that.
Yes, Jason, we did. And when we actually implemented the rate for the first time, we implemented this billing rule that we will implement the rate with full billing cycles. So that we were going to try to avoid the terminology that we use, proration, where you bill certain days in one rate and certain days in the other rate. So for example, right, we started the migration of customers in the fall. We had the prices in the summer. We could have started it in September, but we waited until that season ended. So we started it with the non-summer prices, so with the ones effective in October. And we waited until the customer's billing cycle began with days that are covered from October and beyond. So that way we were trying to avoid in that particular transition that, I would say, complicated bill that you imagine how it would have come. And then, so that helped us in that transition. Now that we are fully operational, yes, the customer do see those because it's just part of the rate, right? Part of the cycles. If their customer sees a bill with days in May and days in June, yes, they will see some of those days billed at the May rate and some of those at the June rate. And then they are added up together, and that's what they pay. But at the beginning, when we rolled it out the first time, to simplify the billing, we waited until the full cycle was on the same period. I hope that helps, Jason.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. And okay, we'll go to John's question, then mine.
Thank you. This has been a great presentation. Just quickly, if you could talk a little bit more in terms of the definition of the peak hour, you know, what consideration was given to kind of a 3-hour window versus a longer window? And I'm assuming that the 5 to 8 period corresponds with your anticipated system peaks. But any background you can provide there would be helpful.
Yes, we have numerous focus groups back in, this is in 2011, 2012, as we were testing the smart pricing pilot. And we had different groups of customers, and we were asking them, you know, what was a good window in which they could save. So the feedback from those focus groups was, in general, that 3 hours was a time that they could handle in terms of having a high price, and then they can do things to mitigate and reduce usage. Here, during that window, the air conditioning is the most usage coming from that kind of appliance equipment. And then in terms of the rest of the hours, I'll tell you, it was a combination of simplicity and also trying to align the cost of power. Initially, we were attempting, for example, to address in the morning that there is a small peak in the morning, because when people get up in the morning, especially, and they connect devices, there is a small peak, but it's not as significant as the actual summer peak. That's the one. That's the one that actually drives our infrastructure and things like that. So we move away to complicating the rate with more time buckets, with more seasons and things of that nature, to just trying to focus on what it was the main objective, which was trying to manage that peak during the summer, during that window between 5 and 8, June through September, in that time, and trying to emphasize that, yes, during that summer month, we have probably 10 or 12 days that is going to be extremely hot, and the peak is going to happen in any of those 12 days. So we have another option for the critical peak pricing that we trigger when those events happen. We encourage those customers to enroll on that rate, help us to reduce more if we can. I hope that helps, Director Dalton.
Thank you. Hey, my question follows on John's question pretty directly, and that is, can you envision a time when it would make sense in terms of looking at the actual cost of electricity, where it would make sense to vary this 5 to 8 p.m. period because your peak costs are now significantly longer than just a 3-hour block, or the 5 to 8 period doesn't correspond as closely to when your peak costs are actually occurring?
Yeah, now that we have the rate and with the higher adoption of renewables during the day, we know that we probably need to take another look. And at the time when we adopted the rate, we thought, no, we'll give ourselves several years, probably, I don't know, 8 to 10 years to then look at it. We're not quite there yet, but if we were to do something like that, there is definitely that's what we will do. So we will take the cost of power, what it is, whether this aligns with that, and we will probably see if there is a need to make tweaks to the time of use periods. And knowing this, there is a significant lift to re-educate the population. So we know that once they are educated, they follow along on that level, and Karen can elaborate more on that. So that's something that we know that every year, as we look at those commodity prices in the market, they not necessarily are perfect aligned with the 5 to 8 as it used to be, but it's still the peak period occurs around that window. So we feel very comfortable that we're still, in terms of load, dealing with the right message. But over time, that's something that is on our pipeline to look at. If with any tweaks, I will use the word, are warranted in order to review if we keep that pricing signal achieving what we wanted to achieve.
Great. We will go to Bianca, but I'm warning everyone else, this is the last question because we do want to get to the second part of the presentation too. So Bianca.
I just had a question about the My Energy tools in relation to the education of customer base. I don't know if it's possible to send a link to, I would love to just look at it if it's possible. Maybe send it to Jason or somebody else at CMLP.
We'll be happy to do that, Bianca. Yeah, at the same time, I think you are gonna show some parts of it on that, but we can definitely send you the link to the to that part of the education information that we share.
Excellent, thank you.
Great, thank you, Bianca. Let's go to the second part of the presentation then.
Right, Karen, it's all yours.
Okay, well, I am ready. So thank you again for having us. And like Alcides said, we're always happy to talk about TOD. So with this transition, it was definitely a heavy lift. The word that we used a lot here was that it was unprecedented. It touched every department at SMUD. So in addition to educating customers, we needed to make sure all of our employees were educated. So we would go to meetings and present about TOD and what was involved with the transition. Alcides shared that graph that was on our intranet site where you could see the transition progress. So we shared that information along the way, created talking points for our contact center, for our field staff if they were asked questions. So yeah, there was a lot going on there. And our goal really was to make sure that as we were putting tools together, we leveraged all the research to make sure that customers understood what this change was, how it was going to impact them, and what they could do to be successful on this rate. And also that there was an option. Next slide, please. So to your question about My Energy tools, these are some of the pieces that are available. There are the usage charts where they can go and they can look by time period, they can look by price, and they can also look by weather and be able to see the impacts to their bill. There are some neighbor comparison tips where you can see if you're using more or less than similarly sized homes, and then you can sign up to get high bill alerts. So that way you can be aware before your bill comes and you can make some changes. And I think I covered it all there. One thing I did want to mention, I think I'll cover that when we get to the next slide. Okay. So again, with our communications, we wanted to make sure that customers knew what was happening, what was coming, and just keep them apprised of the whole transition process. Next slide. So this is our campaign schedule, and we started in 2018 really just to let customers know this was coming because this was such a huge change for all of our customers with the behavior changes they need to make for this new rate. So we started with our campaign introducing time of day, and then we had the transition happening. The second phase was time of day is here. And then we always have a summer campaign that continues to this day, that summer rates are here. Next slide. So this gives you some visuals of how those campaigns look out in the field for customers. So introducing time of day rates, we want to make sure customers knew that it was very clear, reducing between 5 and 8 p.m. Now, one caveat to this, I will say, we couldn't do it here in the graphic, but what we did learn working with our contact center and just getting regular feedback from them, in print materials and anywhere else we say it, we needed to make sure we said 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. There were some customers who thought it was 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. So we had to make sure that we were very, very clear. This campaign, this first phase of it, and actually all three phases, we had television, radio, and I'll go into some of those channels later on, but we made sure customers had every opportunity to hear about time of day and where we were in the transition process. Next slide. So in addition to that campaign, we also wanted to make sure on our website, we had information for customers that was accessible and actionable. We had videos that talked to them about time of day, why we need it, so that they could understand how we produce electricity and the delivery and demand and pricing. We also created a series of that middle image. We called them our 801 videos because it was reminding customers that you can start doing some of these tasks, running your dishwasher, doing laundry at 801. So right after the peak period. And then we wanted to make sure we shared testimonials so people could see real life examples of how customers like them were successful on time of day. Next slide. Thank you, LCDs. Oh, we don't need to play it unless you'd like to see a video. And I don't think there's any sound. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some lag.
Yeah, maybe
You can probably skip that.
Okay, so thanks LCDs. So one of the tools we have on our website, and it's still there now on smud.org/time of day, is an interactive cost estimator. So a customer can go in, they can look at different appliances, they can look at it by season, by the time of day that they're using it, and see what that impact would be cost-wise to their bill. So it is a really fun tool to play around with if you have an opportunity to take a look at it, and it's been really helpful for our customers.
Is that part of the My Energy tools, or is that a separate tool?
This is a separate tool, and this is on our website and not in my account.
Can I ask one question about this?
Yes.
You have the times broken down differently here than your rate periods. You know, that you make a distinction between morning and afternoon, whereas in reality, the rate is the same as to whether it is the morning or the afternoon. Does this confuse people into thinking there might be a difference as to whether they use their clothes dryer in the morning or the afternoon?
We did a lot of testing for this as well, and we didn't have any issues with customers being confused between the time period names and the naming convention that we used for this tool. So we haven't had any confusion.
Okay, good.
Did that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, next slide, please.
A quick question on related to that. In the display of the time of use pricing, you did start the graphs at noontime and then went through noontime the following day instead of doing midnight to midnight. Did you do any thought about that as well? Any kind of research?
Yes, there was. Are you looking at the chart or at the tool that we were just referencing?
The chart, this slide that's up right now.
So the naming conventions, are you asking about that? Because we did test those.
The bottom where it said where the chart starts at noontime instead of starting at 1 a.m. or when the day starts. It's like you've got the back half of the day then goes into the front half of the next day. I'm wondering if people thought of 24 hours as midnight to midnight, or if noon to noon made sense to your customers.
Well, very interesting, because we did start the other way around, and this is what came out of all of the focus groups. This was the most understandable and clearest version for our customers.
That's good to know. I would have assumed the inverse, but that's great.
And that's why the research was so helpful, because we think that this makes sense and this is what we'll do. And then we get it in front of customers and they tell us what really makes sense to them.
Excellent.
That was really helpful. Thank you for asking that.
remind me where we.
Keep going.
Yes.
So I think I have covered this. Are there any other questions on this tool?
No, keep going.
Okay. And so for our awareness campaign, like I mentioned earlier on, we had TV, we had radio, but in addition to that, we not just the mass media, but we had targeted communications. So we have personalized mailings that included the rate education report that showed customers exactly how they'd be impacted on this bill. I mean, on this new rate. And then we also had door hangers, so many pieces that went out to customers. So they had 60 opportunities to see or hear information about this rate coming. Did you put that here for a reason? So Alcides is sharing some of the swag that we had for our customers. So at the community events, we'd have bags. Inside there is a little clock.
Used to be a little like a souvenir with a clock.
So when we had events, thank you for bringing that, Alcides. We also posted on social media. We were on billboards and buses, in print publications, digital ads, search and display. So we made sure that every channel we could use, we took advantage of it. Next slide. So that clock, you can see another version of it there, but that was used as part of our community outreach. So we were in malls, we went to community events. We had a lot of multilingual outreach. Our materials we translated into 17 languages. So we translated brochures, energy saving tips, presentations in language for community organizations. We wanted to make sure we reached every customer where they were in their language. We had education in our lobby. So we had signage there. We would have tables with information for customers who were coming into the lobby. We had promo items like Alcides just shared, and then again, more neighborhood presentations and workshops. Next slide. And I did just cover some of this, but we did a lot of targeted outreach to our ethnic populations with presentations, events, materials, and signage. Next slide. And that is the end of the marketing piece. Are there any questions on any of the marketing?
Any marketing questions?
Awesome.
No, let's go on then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is something that it took us several rounds to wrap them in different areas. But from the process, and I hope this come handy to a utility that is considering implementation. So some of the things, and I will start off on the right side, the first box, the one in green, a robust marketing campaign, at least for us, in terms of educating and connecting with customers, provided us a lot of value, and also making available tools and information, whether those were reports, whether those were like my account and all the other tools that we develop, so that they feel, and in reality, that they have the choices to select the option that they wanted to select, especially when in this case for us, it was an opt-out. So we, in absence of the customers telling us what rate they would like to be, they will be enrolled on the time of day rate. So we want them to respond to us, no, I don't want to be on that rate, I want to be on the fixed rate. And that was very helpful for both. And then resulting in initially 98, 99% adoption of the rate, and not much change since then, has been very, very steady.
Alcides, if I could chime in on this, one thing that we didn't have on our slides was basically our retention efforts. And so every summer we made sure we went back out to customers, let them know the rates were coming. The first few summers we sent out postcards with energy saving tips, just showing them different ways that they could save during the summer. So we made sure to communicate throughout that whole process each summer. And then at the end of summer, we give them a bit of relief. And there is always an end to that summer campaign that says summer rates end September 30th. So that starts to go out September 1st. And so they know, because it typically is really hot still here in September, they know that they only have another month and then we'll be in non-summer rates. So I just wanted to include that too. I think the extra education during the summer and the retention efforts are really helpful to keeping people wanting to stay on the rate and being successful on it.
Which we're about to do again. So
Yes, we
since
are.
we're in at the beginning of May almost, and then June coming, so that's something that we will do.
We're wrapping up right now.
Yeah, then for us, it took us a long time, nearly a decade, from the concepts and the number of transitions and things like that. Again, technology was new, nascent in the context of AMI was new. We were one of the first utilities implementing it at the time, in part because, with support from the Department of Energy. And it took also evolving from the different systems that we have for billing and customer care. That took us that long. Things have changed since then, right? Many utilities, due to need of updating systems or replacing meters, have opted to deploy that technology. It may not take some utilities 10 years, but at least it took us that long, given that we were one of the early adopters of that technology and also heading into this direction. On that part about creating a test drive, an opportunity for the staff to get feedback ahead of rollout, that was very interesting because we call it friends and family. I remember at some point
We did.
we enrolled customers who were employees. So, and trying to gain some insights from, I would say, a safe population, since they are employees and they know more perhaps than a normal customer. And that was very, very helpful. I see that Director Falls may have a question.
I think it's great that you did the pilot and test drove it with people to give feedback and adjustments before you rolled it out. I know we're coming to the end of the hour, so I wanted to ask one more question. You mentioned that you have a peak pricing scheme. How many times have you executed on the peak pricing?
The critical peak pricing, right? That's the one that you're referring to. Yes,
Yeah,
we have been
thank you.
using it over the last 3 years or so.
I think, yeah, 3 years.
Yeah, so we've been using it over the last 3 years and testing it, continue to test the pilot. We call it pilot still. And in 2024, if I'm not wrong, I think we called about 14 events. So actual days that was very hot. And we asked those customers to, save us and their electricity. 2023 was another year that I recall at least we called at least 10 events. And in 2022, just getting out of the pandemic, so we restarted that program. And I don't recall that we actually had an event in 2022. We may have had a couple tests. We did?
Not many, but
Not
yeah,
many,
we
but
did.
we have a couple tests, right? So because we're just coming out of the pandemic, if you may remember, but we are actually planning to use it again this summer. So it's a thing that we are already planning to go ahead and continue to market and hopefully enroll more customers there.
And do you have a way to contact every customer you have, or is it done? How do you announce and execute those days with customers?
There is a direct communication to those customers, and we have a third party who assists us on that, because most of these customers are the ones who have smart thermostats. And then so there is that communication that the thermostat is already connected to a device that communicates. It has that enabled technology. So it's through that kind of messaging that the customers get the I would say the alert that the event is going to be called, and we're asking them to behave to save us electricity during the peak period.
And one final question. What is the price you use with that event?
For that event, we end up doing an adder on the rate is about 50 cents per kilowatt hour more. So if you saw on the prior slide, there's about 37 cents per kilowatt hour, the normal peak, it end up being about 87, close to 90 cents when that event happened, with a corresponding, Melissa reminds me, 2 cents of credit. So we do have that premium on the peak period, but we also reduce the other hours of the off-peak by about 2 cents. So because what we're trying to tell them is, if you consume more in those hours, you will save. And hopefully the premium will encourage them to skip that hour as much as they can. We're not telling them to disconnect the AC or anything like that. So we're trying to be very mindful that this is very hot times, but the best that they can conserve, adjust the thermostat perhaps to a more manageable level, 78 degrees rather than 70 or 72.
Yeah.
Small things.
Great.
So is this your last slide, I believe, is that correct?
This is correct. This is the last slide.
Yeah, have you talked about the journey maps in the bottom right corner?
No, but I can elaborate on that, Director Leon. What we did in that side is we take very serious the customer experience. This is something that every time when we change a rate, we work together with the subject matter experts to walk us through the different steps, the different touching points that the customer is going to experience. And that let us identify those opportunities and risks on how that experience will go. Examples of that are those reports that Karen was describing. They were identified as part of the journey map process. And it's a very intensive, time-consuming process, but it's very valuable. So because I remember sitting at those sessions for hours, right? Walking through how a customer will experience this and what is the next step, what is the customer calling and things like that. But without those, we cannot identify those things that eventually could cause some unintended consequence or something of this nature. So it's a standard procedure that we do. We just did it for this time of day, but it is something that we do for any change, including fees, to the extent that we try to mitigate any risk.
And I will say the journey mapping is also very, very helpful for customer communication, because we were able to make some changes, find some opportunities for additional touch points. So it was time consuming, but very helpful. And then I also want to make sure, I know we're running out of time, but the bottom middle where we talk about the customer service rep tailgates, those were really helpful. And that is where we got some information about, for example, that saying 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. We would meet with our customer service reps. They were able to share what they were hearing directly from customers. And then we could be really nimble and go in and change messaging if we needed to, or clarify things for customers in our materials and on our website. So that was really helpful to have.
Well, this is all great. This is going to be really helpful to us. Does anybody else from the staff or the board, or we'll also open it up to public comments at the moment? Does anybody have a question or a comment?
I just want to say thank you for pioneering this. This is a great structure to provide customers with low-cost power that is reliable and encourages renewables through treating individual customers not as a class, a rate class, but as more of individuals, and giving them the freedom to save money when it saves utility money. It's a good win-win.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, well, there's a lot that we can learn from this, and when we roll out our time of use program, I'm sure you will see the fingerprints of your prior work on what we end up doing. So can we have a motion to adjourn?
So
I move to adjourn.
Okay, I heard a motion and a second. Bianca,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Brian,
yes.
And I say yes as well. So thanks everybody very much for making time for this, and our friends in Sacramento. This was been great. Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.